Another interesting thing about hardops that's worth noting is we also currently support SketchMode. And what this means is that if you get in here and you begin sketching, you can do something like, say, press Alt-X to mirror to the other side, and then begin working symmetrically using our mirror gizmo. This will set you up with a mirror modifier similar to the way that it would normally work, and you can just get in here and just quickly begin just working on shapes. The other interesting thing about SketchMode is that you can get in here and also press Q and bring up a Q menu just like you can for most things. In fact, most things in Blender, there's a Q menu for that. If there's not, ask me about it. One of the interesting options for SketchMode is the ability called Copy Move, which will basically place a duplicate on the other side. I'll get out of camera view and look at this from front view, and we'll use the F9 to actually move this over. And the purpose of this is actually to create duplicates so that you can work on multiple iterations. One of my favorite things when it came to working in 3D starting out was actually doing multiple iterations of the same idea over and over to just see what different possibilities exist within the fabric of a concept. So it is something that I kind of continue on in my sculpt mode and sketch mode work as well. So even though Blender recently added this was something that I found to be just an essential thing that I couldn't live without as far as sketch mode, and felt that there could be a couple of additional tools added to it to make it a little bit more functional. So one of them is the ability to just press Q and just quickly just copy something over and begin working on a duplicate version. So right here I'm holding Control and just erasing a section just to rework an area, and then we can just keep drawing pieces in here, working on this as we go, removing pieces and cleaning things up and refining this idea itself. And then once we're done, we can actually move on to the next iteration of how we want to actually progress this. So it is kind of fun to just draw things and then just copy move it over, and after a while just dial back on it and just see how things progress, and just choose your favorite version and attempt to make it in 3D, which is something that I do all the time as an exercise, even though I'm not posting about it ever. It's just one of those things that I want to just get good at. I feel that with Blender being the way it is now, users should be able to get in, sketch a concept using basic ideas, use the sculpt tools in order to reposition things, and then from there just play with duplicates of the idea to find exactly where they want to go with it. So now I'm in sculpt mode, which is also part of sketch mode, and we're just scaling things out and just playing with proportions to create just different iterations of what this could be. And we're just just playing with very rough sketches here, nothing concrete. I probably could have prepared something special for this video, but I figured we could just start off creating something from scratch. So from here we'll get out of sculpt mode and get back into draw where we're supposed to be. We'll just copy move this over and just start working on a different iteration of this that has a different type of flow to it and style. Maybe get rid of these, but we still want to maybe keep those. Maybe put some insets on that design and start getting some things solid that we actually do like with this. If we were thinking about actually progressing it, we probably want to start darkening some areas in that we actually like, so we can start fading it out and actually working on the final line art version. But I just wanted to show that there is a way that you can get into sketch mode and use hardops to iteratively work through a design process, in addition to being able to mirror things as needed. So the next thing I want to talk about is something called surface offset. So let's actually press Control N and we jump to a new file, and I'm going to grab this cube and actually scale this down, and we'll just turn it into like a panel, and that's actually good enough. We can press Shift A and we'll insert a, let's see, grease pencil blank. And with our grease pencil, I'm just going to move it up so we can see what it is. And I'm going to select my grease pencil and then shift select the cube, and we're going to press Alt X and just mirror it across. And that now sets up our grease pencil. So I'm just going to press Alt G, reposition it back in the center. It really doesn't matter. We're not going to see this thing until we put strokes on it because it's blank. And we're just going to jump into draw mode. We can only jump into draw mode if we have a grease pencil stroke selected. But now that we have this set up, we can actually begin drawing, and we can't actually see it on the surface itself. And the material that we're using actually looks kind of generic. So let's deal with the material. I'm going to jump over to material, create a new material for this. So now we're actually drawing a solid black line, but we want to press Q and choose something called surface offset. What this means is that now we're drawing on the surface of the shape itself. However, if we press escape on that pie menu and control Z on that stroke and press Q and go back to surface offset again, we see that we also have another F9 panel. So we'll press F9 to bring that up. And we want to actually set this to something reasonable, maybe 0.002. I've been thinking about actually changing the defaults, but now you see we're able to sketch on the surface of this itself. And so this is an interesting way to kind of have some fun with grease pencil, especially playing in a 2D environment. So sometimes I'll come into Blender and just approach shapes a little differently, where instead of getting in and modeling and dealing with extrusions, I'll just get in and just begin playing with grease pencil and just sketching on a surface and drawing what could be, and just putting, you know, ramps and loops and things like that, just kind of playing with ideas that are just sitting in my head. Sometimes the idea that I'm thinking of is just too primitive in order to put into geometry. However, basically any idea can be put into geometry at this point, I feel, after all the tools that we went over. But we'll just keep drawing some things, maybe even put a grate here. I mean, we could be talking about drawing straight lines, but instead I'm just drawing in perspective in the worst angle possible for getting this, just to really bring this point home. Another thing about drawing these sketches on top of the surfaces is I'm a fan of selecting the object, and we don't even have to select the object, but we just want to shade it as basically object, I believe. Or actually, let's change it to flat up top. So now it's on flat, and we want to turn off cavity and shadow. And if we look at this in only render mode, basically we're just sketching on top of a white block of paper. And the cool thing about this is this thing is inside of a collection. So we'll just leave this where it is for the moment, and we'll just Shift A, add another collection. And we'll place this just in the front, like so. And then we'll Shift D, duplicate it again, and place another one here. And so if we were, like, say, sketching an environment, we would be able to conceptualize it on these white blocks and then have it put together and just array them out and just look at them as if they were assembled in some sort of 3D drawing. I mean, it would take a little bit of imagination in order to put it all together, but keep in mind that at this state, even while duplicated, we could still get in here and just keep drawing ideas. And if I weren't doing a video where I was considering myself pressed for time, I would definitely be able to draw long enough to basically tap into the artistic side of my brain instead of thinking about just the technical software explanation side of things. But once you get into it and you spend a little time just kind of zoning out in your music, just drawing lines, you'll find that maybe you found yourself sketching a pretty impressive result that you can then replicate and duplicate and show and share around. So let's select these pieces, and I'm just going to Shift D, move them over. Even though this is terrible, we're just going to arrange these to be like some sort of wall tiles. And we can actually duplicate this piece over and bring it over on the Y. And even as we continue working, we'll just see it get propagated to all the walls. When it comes to why it's actually showing up the way it is, that's a deeper question. But if we jump over to Look Dev, we can actually see these sketches showing up exactly on the surfaces as they were intended without any sort of rendering issues. So it could just be something happening with solid view. But that is basically me going over what you can expect whenever you're in draw mode, dealing with the Q menu. We talked about mirror, we talked about copy move, and we also talked about surface offset. The rest of these options we've already talked about in depth and are just here as a way to get users acquainted with some of our more permanent options that maybe need to be accessed even without a mesh selected. Like this time we're in draw, but there may be a time where you'll need to go into asset multi-loader to load in, say, a sketch, even though you're in draw mode at this very time. But hopefully that sheds some insight on what sketch mode with hardops has to offer.